it's in there
designed for it.
It's in there pretty snugly, but if you're gonna take it out and move it around, just be careful with that. I mean, you could alternatively just pop it out and walk around with it.
And
as well.
so we can also pull
Yep.
it out and just
Yep.
stroll.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
That's all I
that
wanted to
sounds
tell you.
good. All right.
All right.
No, I didn't.
I'm not.
Check, 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 check. Check, check.
Yeah. Okay. Hello? 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 Boy, I wish this thing was higher. I feel like I have to. Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to get started. And this is a public hearing on the elementary school capacity solutions. This is the public hearing on the elementary school capacity solutions. And the way this is going to go tonight, I'm going to have a couple of introductory remarks, and then we're going to have Ben Lummis and Pip Lewis, Ben from the school staff and Pip Lewis from HMFH Architects, to kind of set some of the context. And I asked them to try and keep it. I'm going to announce publicly, and he's giving me the evil eye, no more than 15-ish minutes, because this really is your opportunity to tell us what you think. In terms of introductory remarks, at town meeting, the advisory committee, and we're represented, the advisory committee is represented up here. By the way, this is a joint public hearing of the school committee, the select board, and the ad hoc subcommittee of the advisory committee. You guys got to come up with a better name, but we're so far into the process about the elementary school capacity solution. And the way this is structured is that the two decision-making bodies are the school committee and the select board, and the appropriation vote has the ad hoc subcommittee of the advisory committee giving us their wisdom and advice, and I say that seriously because I'm hoping to get some good wisdom and advice from my former colleagues on the advisory committee. And I know our process in the past has come under a bit of criticism, but I just want to say, and I know in the recent select board campaign there was criticism of the process. What's interesting is we have a mix of solutions involving school properties and non-school properties. And for the school properties, to do anything on the school properties, we need the school committee to assent to that. And then if we're doing anything on non-school properties, that's within the purview of the select board. And then, of course, the select board the select board decides what to put on the ballot. And so it's a complicated structure. And because it's a complicated structure, the two committees really need to to be involved in the decision, and that's why we've set it up that way. At town meeting, the advisory committee and also the select board gives a budget speech. And I'd just like to read about 4 sentences from the budget speech that I gave at town meeting regarding this process, regarding the ninth school. And starts, this has been a long process that's not been as linear as I would have hoped. And each solution has its pros and its cons, its difficulties, and its trade-offs. None of the solutions are going to make everyone happy, and some of the solutions aren't going to make anyone happy. But, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what solution is selected, it will involve compromise, give and take, and if we had a perfect solution, we would have already found it. And that is the absolute truth. This is a tough problem. This is a built-up town, and there's just not a lot of land. And the kids are here, and they need to be educated. They need to have places to sit. I want to, before we get into the presentation from Mr. Loomis and Mr. Lewis, I'd just like to say something about one of the sites that's up there, and it actually pertains to more than one of the sites, and that's the Putterham site that's kind of come in toward the end of this process. And we are fully aware of some of the challenges before us with that site, and I will acknowledge that we haven't figured out all the solutions yet. So the 3 that I'm aware of that are kind of deal breakers, potentially, if we can't solve them. The first is Article 97. And we're fully aware of Article 97. And for those of you who read the press and are aware of the TABS website, on the TABS website today is some of the activities we've had trying to come up with what is in reality a land swap. And what we were trying to do there is to preserve into perpetuity a beautiful Olmsted designed landscape. And that would have been the Article 97 swap. And that particular thing isn't happening. But I just want to give you all a sense of the kinds of things we're trying to do. We're trying to make this a win-win and expand the open space inventory and preserve as much as we can. And we realize that Article 97 is not only a legal process, it's a political process. So whatever we come up with has to be politically sellable. So we're working on that. The other piece is traffic around, it's a challenging site with traffic. And we're fully aware of the Horace James Circle, and we've had discussions with DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, I think is. And if that were to become the site, those discussions would continue. And we're also aware of the fire training center, which is adjacent to the site, and we would be talking to the fire department and coming up with a solution that satisfies the fire department and keeps everyone safe. So before we were, if that were our choice, we're fully aware of those things. So you can comment on those, and that's fine. But we're already aware of that. So going forward tonight, we're going to have the summary presentation, and then it's going to be your turn. And I'm told approximately 50 people have signed up, and I suspect there'll be more coming in. And at 3 minutes each. 50 people is 150 minutes. And I'm committed to staying here until everyone who wishes to speak can speak. And because of that, because we have so many people who wish to speak, I'm going to be running a timer, and I have a little thingy here, 1 minute, and then please conclude, and I'll be asking you to conclude. You have the opportunity, and I would suggest you take us up on it, to submit written comments to us, and we'll give you an email address. I know a number of folks, we've been getting a lot of letters, and I apologize for not acknowledging all of them, but I and the other board members have been deluged. So I apologize if we haven't acknowledged it, but rest assured that I certainly, and I suspect my colleagues, read every one of these correspondence. And a number of people have sent letters. We've received a 26-page letter from an attorney. And I'm sure we'll be getting more of those. When I get to the speakers list, I will be giving preference to Brookline residents. So I'm just announcing that up front. So, Mr. Loomis.
Great, thank you, Mr. Wyszynski. You can hear me? Good. Just a couple quick housekeeping. Details. You'll see we are missing a mic here. It looks like we're short a mic. Oh no, here it comes now. So you can see, public comment can happen from either one of those microphones there at the end of the aisles. So we'll go through this quickly. As Mr. Wyszynski said, we're on the clock. So this will be quite a bit faster than we did a few weeks ago at Town Hall. So just quickly, we want to give folks some context. There are new faces in the auditorium here, and new folks listening, I hope, on through cable TV or the web. So we're in phase 1 here. We are studying the sites that are up there on the screen. The purpose here over the next few weeks is to decide on a single site or multiple site option or solution for addressing the ongoing historic enrollment growth in Brookline. That would then spawn phase 2, as you can see, which are feasibility design services. We'll talk a little bit about those in a moment. One of the goals when the town meeting started or continued or revised the process last November was to have an open, transparent, inclusive process. And we want to show you here quickly how many listening sessions, how many public updates, how many school committee, select board here meetings have had. And as you can count there, it's more than 20 sessions and public meetings since this began in late November. And here's a quick summary of all those meetings, updates. We've been working also with town departments, Parks and Recreation, the legal counsel, the building department, and many others all along the way. They've been helping us and supporting the school department and Dr. Joe Connolly, who's been leading the study. This is just a quick detail of what's included in the final report. There are 6 copies on the board members' tables up here. As you can see, it's an extensive report, not only the options and details from that, which HMFH has done, but also traffic studies, open space comparisons, enrollment charts, legal summary, the historic efforts dating back to 2008. Those are all in the binders that are up here on the front, and all that information is also available on the district website. Just quickly, in terms of placing where we are right now, we are in phase 1 here, project scope. Phase 2, as I said before, is feasibility study. That would happen if and when the boards agree on a single or multiple site option. Then we go into schematic design. That is when the scope for the project and details of the preferred design are developed. Okay, it's another level of detail. And then further on from that is design, development, and construction documents. All told, in a perfect world that does not exist, this would be a 26-month process. But when you add in things such as Article 97, perhaps, town meeting process, obviously, perhaps you'll also have to do debt exclusion override to fund any project. That all those things extend the perfect platonic time frame of 26 months beyond that significantly. So we are really, despite the fact of being 8 years into this or more, we are still in phase one of this whole process to build and to expand any capacity. In terms of the challenge that's ahead of us, there's quite a few actually. There's a historic and ongoing enrollment growth. We'll show you a slide in a second. Since 2005, the K-8 schools have grown by 40% in enrollment. We have early education programs that are not in our current buildings. They're in leased space, and they will continue to be even after we have access to a new early education center. Every single school building has substandard spaces. We have temporary rentals at a number of schools, Pierce and Baker, as well. We also have administration offices in leased spaces as well, because we don't have space in them anymore in the buildings we own, the school buildings we own. All core facilities in all schools are over capacity and too small to handle the enrollment growth and the current student population. And then the last piece is also a very important piece, renovation and updating facilities. We've updated and renovated a number of our facilities in the past 15 to 20 years, but Driscoll and Pierce have not had any renovation updating in 30 plus years. Just a quick graphic on the enrollment increases. You can see them from 5,000. This is just part of the enrollment increase. This is just going back 5 years, going ahead 5 years, is not only an increase of 400 since the last 5 years, but we anticipate another 300 plus in the coming years, primarily due to ongoing development growth. This you can see is the growth by school, both in numbers since 2005, but in the right-hand column, the percentage of the 2005 enrollment that it increased by. No schools less than 18%, and many of them are above. Most of them are above 40% growth, which is spectacular. And really, at this point, we don't know of a community in the Commonwealth that is experiencing this type of growth, nor has in a long, long time. That results in a classroom need of 36 classrooms, as detailed in the educational plan that was created during the Baldwin feasibility study. These do not all have to happen in one school, okay? They can happen across multiple schools. And this is just quickly where we anticipate enrollment growth to happen based on where students live, where we expect students to be living, or project students to be living 4 years from now. Okay, you can see that there's growth in north and south, which is equal to the Baker district. In the central, there's less growth. Things sort of stay steady, we anticipate. Less development going on in those areas. The last thing, just to give some, in terms of this overview and context, is just to place people. Another challenge that we have is that this has been going on for quite some time. The original master plan that identified the need for growth was in 2009. There have been 3 or 4 different studies since then, at least 3 different public processes since then. And as I said before, we are still in phase one of trying to identify options about where to expand. So this has been going on for a long time, as most folks know and have been experiencing. I'll have Pip up here to talk about the cost assumptions that we will share with you tonight, and then he'll quickly go through the options and just to give folks an overview of the options that the boards are considering.
Okay, thanks, Ben. The main thing I'll be doing is giving a quick overview of the various options that we've looked at, and those options include the cost, so I wanted to explain what costs exactly we're looking at here. The cost that you will see, we're calling the preliminary project estimate, which includes the hard construction costs, costs of renovation and new construction, any demolition, and also the soft costs that will be included with any construction project, which is fees, furniture, survey costs, geotechnical costs, things along those lines. It also includes escalation. And for the purposes of this study, we've escalated every project to assume a beginning of construction in the fall of 2020, and that reflects the approximate 26 months that Ben referred to. There are 2 major types of costs that are not included in this, and that is swing space costs, which is the cost of relocating kids temporarily to another facility or modulars while construction goes on, and land acquisition costs, which could be the result of purchasing property, for instance, with an eminent domain acquisition, or purchasing property for a land swap related to an Article 97 process. So I'm going to go over the various options that we looked at that are grouped in a few different ways. We have essentially on the left-hand side there the ninth school options, where we're building a standalone school on a new school site. Plus, we're going to look at various expand in place options. So first, the building a 3-section, 27 classroom school at either Putterham, Baldwin, or Pine Manor. The first one I'm going to look at is the new site, essentially, which is Putterham, which was referred to earlier, making use of a wooded lot that's part of the municipal golf course at the moment, building a completely new 3-section school at that point. And it is this adds 27 classrooms to the overall mix in Brookline. The cost of this we're estimating to be $106 million. And in addition to those costs that are stated, you would also have the costs of, because this is an Article 97 site, we may have the cost of acquiring land for a swap. Then we looked at the Baldwin Plan D. This is familiar to people from the earlier study that was done. And this is building a new school where the Baldwin School currently is and making use of part of the school recreation center. This also involves an Article 97 swap because of the use of the parts of the school recreation center. This adds 27 classrooms. The cost of this we're estimating at $103 million, and because of Article 97, there may be a cost for purchasing additional land for a land swap. This is the Baldwin North site, where the attempt here was to consolidate the school into a more compact school that sat only on the Baldwin School property so that we avoided all the Article 97 issues. And therefore avoiding those costs. This adds 27 classrooms in a 5-story building. It has underground parking because of the limitation of the site. We don't have place for on-site parking. And it has a limited amount of on-site queuing that can occur also. This we're estimating at $117 million. And then we looked at the Pine Manor site, which was developed, I think, toward the end of the previous study. This also adds 27 classrooms. And the shape of the site is related, of the building, is related to working with the existing topography of the site. It makes use of underground parking underneath the footprint of the existing building. And this we're estimating to cost $121 million. But to that, you would need to add the cost of purchasing property from the Pine Manor College. With that, we go to the expand in place options. And first, I'm going to look at Baker and Pierce because each of those have multiple options. And at Baker, we looked at this 6-section school, which we did as a K-5, 6, 7, 8, essentially splitting the large school into 2 smaller buildings, housing in the existing Baker School 6 grades, and then building a new 3-grade school adjacent to it. This has a cost of, well, this will add 17 classrooms to Brookline's classroom capacity. And has a cost of $184 million. To that, because of having to renovate and make additions to the existing Baker School, you also have swing space issues and costs with this, which you didn't have with essentially the 9th school options. For this option, which we call Baker 5, which is expanding Baker into a 5-section school, right-sizing things and providing the proper size gymnasium, cafeteria, library, and aspects along those lines. And doing that by building the light blue addition that you see in order to add the capacity. So this adds 8 classrooms, because it's only a 5-section school, to Brookline. The cost of this, and you'll see the cost of some of these vary. This cost will vary between 92 and 138 million, and this variation is based on the amount of renovation that was decided to do to the existing Baker School. In addition to that, again, you have additional swing space costs. Next, we looked at constructing 2 3-section schools at the Baker site. When I say constructing, we're talking about taking the existing Baker and reducing it in size, in population, to 3 sections, which is essentially right-sizing it for the support spaces that it has right now, and then building an additional 3-section school adjacent to it. This gives you a good amount of flexibility with the amount of renovation that you do to the existing Baker School, because you could do a thorough renovation, or you could do a more minor fix-up. And so the cost for this adds 17 classrooms, but the costs range from 109 million to 163 million. Depending on which option you went with, meaning how much renovation you decided to do, you may or may not get involved with costs of temporary swing space for the students. In this case, we made as much use of the existing Baker School as possible, so that we had that low range cost of 109 million. In this option, which we call Baker 3-3 option 2, we're actually taking down some of the less dense portions of the Baker School and building a more compact addition, which allows us to open up some more area for play. What this does is this requires, because there's so much construction at the existing Baker School, requires swing space and requires full renovation to the existing Baker. And then in addition to that, like the other option, we're adding a 3-section school adjacent to it. So this is 2 separate schools on the same site. This adds 17 classrooms. This would be at $184 million. You would have to add to that the cost of swing space. Turning to the Pierce School, first we looked at a 6-section school, where what we did here, similar to Baker, is we used the existing Pierce to house 6 grades, which perhaps grades K through 5, and then we built a new standalone building to house the 3 additional grades, perhaps 6, 7, and 8. And what this does is this allows us to build a standalone building. The kids continue to go to Pierce while the new building is under construction. This site, as well as this option, as well as the other Pierce options, all assume that we're purchasing some of the commercial property along Harvard Street for more space on the site. This adds 17 classrooms. The construction costs vary between 108 million and 173 million. Again, like at Baker, this depends on how much renovation one decides to do to the existing Pierce School. Whether or not you need swing space depends also on the amount of renovation that's decided to do to the Pierce School. And this also requires the additional costs for acquiring commercial property on Harvard Street. This is all summarized in charts at the end of the presentation. The next option, which you call a Pierce 5 option 1, puts a 5-section school at Pierce. And really, this is really exactly the devotion school program that's being built right now. This engages the new addition with the existing building and does an extensive renovation of the existing building. Because it's a 5-section school, this adds 8 classrooms to Brookline's capacity. The cost to this option is $142 million. It has swing space costs because of the extent of the renovations that are going to be required here. And it also has property acquisition costs because of the commercial property on Harvard Street. Next option is Pierce 5, option 2, where we said, well, why don't we look at doing the same thing with the devotion program, but building it as a separate school, similar to what we were doing with the 6-section option. And this also adds the 8 classrooms here because you have some flexibility with what you do to the existing Pierce School. The cost for this could range from $70 million to $148 million. Whether or not you need swing space depends on how much work you're doing in the existing Pierce building, and it will include additional costs for purchasing property on Harvard Street. We then looked at a 3-section and 3-section school as we did at Baker on the Pierce site. And in this case, because it's such a dense site, the only way we could really do this was to take down the existing Pierce School entirely and build 2 new schools. The part that remains of the existing Pierce is the Pierce primary wing that becomes part of one of the 3-section schools. So you've got 2 3-section schools on a relatively dense site. In this case, we purchased the property on Harvard Street in order to expand open space. The majority of open space in all of these Pierce options is still the play area that's located across School Street. And this adds 17 classrooms to the Brookline capacity. The cost of this is $225 million, we're estimating, and you have significant swing space costs because you have to relocate the entire Pierce School population temporarily. So then we look at 2 other options where we take Driscoll and Heath each and we make them into an honest 4-section school. In each case, what we're doing is we're adding 9 classrooms to each of these 2 schools. So at Driscoll, what we're looking at is a new multi-story addition with a new gym and classrooms and things like that. Most of the additional capacity that's needed, also for added support space. To the south end of the building, this is replacing the inadequately sized gym that's there at the moment, making that as compact as possible to preserve open space, preserve the tennis courts. And you will also see that in the middle of the building, we're expanding the cafeteria and kitchen facilities so it can handle the new population. This adds 9 classrooms. The cost for this, depending on the extent of the renovations to Driscoll, is $60 million to $83 million. Swing space is easily possible, but depending on the amount of renovation that you do to the existing Driscoll, you may be able to work around that. At Heath, similarly, we're adding a total of 9 classrooms, and in this case, we're also taking down an undersized gymnasium that's located on the right-hand side of the school there, and replacing it with a multi-story classroom facility, making it as compact as possible to preserve as much open space as we can just to the right of the new addition. And then to the left, we're building a new gym in a portion of the green space adjacent to the driveway on that side of the building. We're also expanding cafeteria and kitchen space in order to have the proper capacity located there. And those are the various options that we looked at. This is a relatively complicated chart of how we worked through the costs. I'm going to click quickly through that, and what this is, these 2 pages are the summaries of the costs of the options and the costs, plus the added classroom capacity that I just talked to you about for each of the options.
So let's leave that other slide up.
Which,
Just the previous one.
yeah. And the audience has copies of these pages. We'll bring up copies to all of you as well. They're on legal size. They're out a single, page. The audience has, we had printed copies of these 2 pages here that were available. We'll get some for the boards as well. And then also there are printed copies available of the whole entire presentation plus, which is really the full presentation, which included added detail of all the options as well. We just did 1 slide per. You have the printed copies that have much more detail.
Okay. This slide doesn't have all the projects. We can show the other one if the occasion calls for it. Just before we get into the public comment, just to put a little more context, we've been throwing around numbers like 100 million and 200 million, and then you start putting things together, you get into 300 million and 400 million. Just a $100 million debt override that we would put on the ballot would yield a 3.36% increase in taxes. So for every 100 million, it's about 3.4%. So 200 million is 6.7, 300 million is 10 point, can't read my own handwriting, 07 or 27. 400 million is 13.4. So, all this stuff translates into increased taxes. So that's something we're going to have to take into account in addition to the factors like the pedagogical model, the risks of varying kinds, and of course, walkability that I know everyone is concerned with, and something is going to have to give, because none of the projects satisfy all our desires. So last I heard, we were over 50 speakers who've signed up. I'm going to try to be fair and try to get everyone who wishes to speak speaking. So I'm going to try and hold everyone to 3 minutes, and we'll warn everybody when you're getting close. And something I say whenever I have a public hearing, if someone else has made the point you're going to make, it's perfectly okay to say, I agree with so-and-so on this point, and then make another point, and that would that's effective and gets the point across, and is a more efficient use of our time. So I'm going to start calling folks, and I'm going to call the speaker, and then I'll call an on-deck person, so the on-deck person can come forward, and we can try and speed things up so we're not here till midnight. So first up is Rachel Wilson, and after that is Sarah Lucas.
Is this mic on? Yep.
Yes.
My name is Rachel Wilson. I'm a parent of a kindergartner at Pierce School. I'm also a town meeting member for Precinct 10. So, hello. Chair Wyszynski mentioned to us that something's got to give, and the point I want to get across today is I would rather have a basic school in my neighborhood than a fancy school outside. This mic is going out. So, if we build a 9th school in South Brookline, hundreds of students will be
No. Can we?
If we build a 9th school in South Brookline, hundreds of students currently at Pierce or Driscoll will be reassigned to Runkle or Lincoln. Hundreds of Runkle students will be reassigned to Heath, and hundreds of students at Lincoln and Heath will be reassigned to a new school. This will create a mismatch between homes and schools where a large fraction of the students in the town will have to ride past one school to attend another school to the south, and this is likely to be a permanent mismatch in our town. Now, these reassignments are important because they would make our schools dramatically less walkable. And when students and parents have the option of walking to school, I want to make the point that that strengthens parent-teacher contacts because teachers see many parents every day. And it builds communities because parents see each other on the walk. And it gives kids an easy dose of exercise and fresh air at the start of a school day. And as the parent of a very wiggly, energetic kindergartner, I'll tell you, I think that's a big deal. When walking is not an option, it means that kids have to ride buses or else they're dropped off by parents who stay behind the wheel. And this means that parents rarely see teachers, parents rarely see other parents, traffic becomes congested around the schools. I just want to draw attention to Dave Gayshawk's great handout on this topic, which quotes a estimate by a traffic consultant saying that traffic would be backed up for a half a mile around the Putterham Woods if we go forward with that project. Families that could manage to live carless may need to buy a car. One-car families may need to buy a second car. Parking becomes a bigger problem everywhere in the city as a result, and carbon emissions go up. Now, the elephant in the room is that a ninth school in South Brookline is cheaper, but I worry that these financial estimates don't include the real long-term costs of a ninth school. These costs include the costs of busing, the cost of increased traffic congestion throughout the city, the cost of increasing numbers of cars owned by Brookline residents and the resulting parking crunch, costs of the planet of increased carbon emissions. Speaking personally, I don't feel we need a fancy new school or a fancy expansion of an existing school. My son at Pierce School currently attends class in a small, relatively dingy, rectangular brick box, and that's a fair description of the historical building at Pierce. And that's okay with me. It's okay with me if he finishes school in that manner. What matters are great teachers, great parental involvement, and a solid fundamental curriculum, and we've got those things, so I don't feel we need to splurge on a glossy architect's vision. I'd rather have a basic school in my neighborhood.
Thank you. Sarah Lucas and Mike Offner.
Is this working? Is this working here? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, Rachel, I totally agree with you. I think that the architects have gotten a bit overexcited about these new schools, and I think lost sight of what's happening in terms of just needing to get there fast. I was a glutton for punishment and watched the 2-hour video of your last meeting. It will not make YouTube's best hits, or you're not going to be watched by millions, but I greatly appreciate it. I also read all of the legal briefings as well. Thank you for the transparency, much, much appreciated. You all said that you wanted us to come with bundles at the end of that meeting. Come with some options. Think about what we did. So I listened to that. I think that I have no skin in the game about Pierce or Driscoll, but I see a bunch of Pierce parents here that I think are going to advocate for renovating Pierce. And my sense is if you've got people saying, yes, go do it, just go do it. You've got so many people saying, no, don't do that. Just go do what they want you to do. And it sounds like Driscoll, you've got to be there anywhere. I heard the advisory committee also talking about this is going to take a lot of time, a lot of cost. We're in for that. No matter what we do, guys, roll up your sleeves. It's going to be a long slog. So I tried to think about the bundle. If you had to put it together, I would say take care of Driscoll, take care of Pierce, because you're going to have to do it anyway. So just do it now. Get going. If you had to pick, and you'll be surprised at this, if you had, and hear me through to the end of this because it's a surprise ending. If you had to pick a new school, I think we started with Baldwin. Yay, that fell apart. A picture of Pine Manor was hastily drawn together. If you actually look at the attachment on Pine Manor College, the 150-foot buffer that's required by the town goes right smack through the building design. You can't build that building. The traffic and the buffer problem, yeah, there is. It's a dotted line, goes right through the building design. Look at it. It's right on your pieces of paper. So you can't build that building design. The traffic on Heath is going to be backed up. The queuing is not going to work. Your traffic report actually says as much that it's not going to work. It's not going to work on Woodland. I just feel like you kind of rush that through to, again, have this fancy new school that everybody's supposed to drool over, and nobody wants the damn thing. So, just let it go. And it's very expensive. It is going to cost you. The other thing that Mr. Pollack said is you had 6 tenets, you said. One of them was deliverability. That one is dead on arrival. Between the lawsuits, the wetlands issues, which everybody keeps glossing over, is you're going to have the lawsuits, the wetlands issues, you're going to have to go through the Wetlands Protection Agency. This thing's going to be hung up for 10 to 15 years, so you could win the battle and lose the war on that one regardless. Potterham is your best bet. That's your best bet for a new school. And guess what? Everybody's tanking that one. I still say Potterham is your best bet. If you are insisting on building a new school, go with Potterham and just be ready for a 6 to 7 year slog to figure out where you're going to get the land swap, how you're going to work with the fire department. I think that's the least of your issues, and work on the transportation issues. I think Potterham actually would be really good. I just think it's going to take you a while to get there. So go for Driscoll, Pierce. You got to do it anyway. And if you really, really want a new school, go to Potterham. You own the darn thing already. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Offner and Mike Harrington is up next.
Good evening. My name is Mike Offner, and I am a Runkle dad. Our capacity building principles should be equity, practicality, and walkability. EPW, equity, practicality, and walkability. And whatever we approve as a first step, it should be a first step that makes sense as part of an eventual total package solution that addresses all of our foreseeable capacity needs. I therefore support the plan put forth by town meeting member Pierce Parent and advisory committee member Mariah Nobrega. This plan proposes that we prioritize adding capacity as follows: renovate and expand Driscoll, renovate and expand Pierce, renovate and expand Baker. So let's call this plan Driscoll, Pierce, Baker. This plan offers an equitable, walkable, and practical total package solution. And it starts with the cheapest piece, the renovation and expansion of Driscoll. This first piece requires no land swap under Article 97 and no eminent domain. It is surely the cheapest and fastest first piece we can do. And expanding Driscoll could also relieve some of the capacity pressure at Pierce, which is currently our most overcrowded school. After renovating and expanding Driscoll, we could then move on to Pierce, which is the most overcrowded and most in need of renovation of all of our schools. Ideally, we would succeed in partnering with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA, to share the cost of this project with us. After Pierce, we would then move on to expanding Baker, taking advantage of Baker's 3.5 acres of on-site open space. However, if there were to remain significant opposition to expanding at Baker, and if we were able to find a buildable site via an Article 97 swap or otherwise, we could still choose at that point to build a new school in South Brookline. This Driscoll Pierce Baker plan can be found online at tinyurl.com/Driscoll Pierce Baker. Above all, please, let's get going with a first step that is equitable, practical, and walkable, and that makes sense as part of a total package solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Harrington, and after Mr. Harrington is DJ Morse.
Hi, my name is Mike Harrington, town meeting member from Precinct 16. I just feel like we've been going at this for years and years and years, adults talking ad nauseum while the kids continue to suffer in overcrowded schools. And I'm very sympathetic to what's been said by previous speakers about needing renovations at Driscoll and Pierce and Baker. But, you know, we had this conversation a couple years ago, and I remember in October of 2016 sitting in this auditorium and hearing, I believe it was Susan Wilf Ditkoff saying, we're not talking about anything except a ninth school. Don't talk about anything else. And it's like we're going back in time to that. We need to just move forward with this. And personally, I think we need to have a ninth school. Looking at the numbers that have been presented tonight, we need to be able to justify this economically, how this is going to work. And again, I am sympathetic to the needs to renovate existing structures, but we need to get something on the boards for the current overcrowding as well as anticipated growth. We're not going to be putting in place another school for years, for decades. We discussed this at the last go-round, how the last school was built 50 years ago. We've got to be looking 50 years into the future. We really, really need more space. And again, I'm not sure that renovating and expanding in place is going to get us as much as we need, especially with the numbers that we're being presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morse, and after Mr. Morse is Nancy Gorer? Okay. And then after Perry Stoll will be after Mr. Morse.
Hey, good evening. My name is DJ Morse. I've got 2 kids at the He School, and I'm a Brookline firefighter. I'm here unofficially, officially representing the local 950, the union, and we are against the school at Putterham. Station 6, the fire department that's up there, has been the training yard since the 1920s. Currently under construction, we are building a new mechanics facility and a larger burn building. Up there at that facility, we do host fire academies, and we do live fire training. A lot of our training is done during the course of the week. We have 4 groups in the town of Brookline. So we train either Monday through Friday or Tuesday through Thursday, and we burn a variety of stuff. Whether it's wood and hay, we burn furniture, cars, flammable liquids. All of these products produce smoke, some nasty toxins, even some carcinogens. And that's why we wear all of our protective gear, our respirators. The trees at Putterham Woods act like a buffer for us. They help push those smokes and heated gases further up into the air. And what does filter through dissipates quickly over the golf course and the parking lot. As you know, training is a constant essential in the fire department. It helps keep us sharp, and it helps keep the public safe. In addition to all that training, we do other training as well, throwing ladders, throwing water, doing a bunch of different things. We also test our ladders every year. We test hoses, we test our pumps, we run the engines. Having the school there, the kids are going to be exposed to the smoke. They're going to be distracted by the activity and the noise. I know I would be as a kid. I would rather look out the window and see what they're doing than math or anything else. And this would create a problem for the school, which would then create a problem for us. We would have to coordinate our training through the school, and working with the school has been great, but we have had difficulties recently just addressing routine fire drills where it's taken 5 to 6 weeks to coordinate one based on testing and the kids' needs, whether it's SATs, PSATs. I can't keep up with all the tests these kids are taking, but I'm about to find out. This would definitely hinder our ability to train effectively, and as a firefighter and a resident of this town, I would not send my kids to that school. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Stoll, and after Mr. Stoll is Julie Jetty.
Hi, my name is Perry Stoll. I live in Precinct 13. I have 3 kids, 2 of whom are at Driscoll. So we're 10 years into this enrollment growth. This season I'd call Expand in Place 2.0, the Make Them All Mega Schools edition. I'm hoping we can get to the next season, which is actually that wasn't that hard. As I think about this problem, I think and try to take the long-term historic perspective and think of what would folks 2 or 3 generations from now think back about our decisions and how we made those decisions. And I think there's a thing that, here's how I think about it. The future kids will be walking on their way to school, and they'll be walking past that large sports field, Parsons. It's empty on their way to school, and on their way home, it's locked and empty, and all they know is they can't use it. They don't know it's a 5-acre lot, which is perfectly sited for a 9th school to address overcrowded schools. All they know is that they see it and wonder why they can't use it, right? Another possible future that those students walk by is they're walking by Parsons luxury condominium development, right? Another 40B project. I'd say never say never. Those future parents will be asking, why did people walk back then not do the slightly brave but obvious thing and do eminent domain of Parsons Field? As we walk on our way to a school of capacity 1,200 kids, even if it's a double school at Pierce. They'll ask, why didn't they realize they were putting many of their schools high on the list of largest schools in Massachusetts? Much like the original enthusiasm and zeal that accompanied the original plans of Pierce with its innovative open floor plan, I suspect the supporters of the Pierce 1200 think they're taking a bold step in that direction. They told themselves they could make big schools feel small. But I think of the connections, the community we had for my daughter when she was in first grade, walking down the hall, seeing her friends, seeing her brother's friends who she knew, going to the nurse who knows her names and know that she's chatty and when she gets a Band-Aid. Of the other parents who see each other, the same idea as a community. The folks when we coach on the soccer fields there, when we're doing our PTA fundraisers, that's the community that I value in these smaller schools. So let's do some spitballing. Parsons Field, 5 acres, it's zone T5, so you need about 5,000 square feet per building. You can put it two units per building. So let's call it 8 units per acre, 8 buildings an acre, okay? Times 5 acres, 40 buildings, 80 units. Okay, how much is that? I don't know. How much is a developer going to pay in profit? 200,000, 500,000, a million? Am I in and willing to pay to take that at 20 million? Yep. 50 million? Yep. 80 million? Let's see, right? So that's my take. I think it's the best solution. There's no Article 97. There's no wetlands. There's no swing space required. It gets us the most capacity in one go. The ninth school, is right. So let's be bold and brave. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, and after Ms. Jetty is Cal Tennant.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to actually start by thanking the two boards, the Select Board and the School Committee. This has been an extraordinarily long process. I don't know how you've had the stamina to hang with it this long, to be continually second-guessed, to go back to the drawing board again and again, but I want you to know that, that there are many people who do really appreciate the work that you're doing. So a lot of people here are expressing concerns about walkability, and I respect, how much people value being able to walk to school. I happen to not be able to live close enough to school to walk. And I have to say, I'm just more concerned about what's happening inside the schools than about how kids get to school. I'd also quickly add that when people talk about the Putterham, Baldwin, or Pine Manor options not adding any walkability, for students who would take a bus to those schools, there actually would be added walkability because they would be walking to a bus stop as opposed to being driven to school. And I know that's not something that we think about much in this town, but people also make connections in community at bus stops. So after years of following this debate and thinking about where a school should be and what it should look like, I still come down to the fact that we really need a single school site to solve this problem. All of the combinations of expand in place, it's too few spaces for too much money, too slowly. To solve the overcrowding in our schools, it's getting worse in a responsible way. I just don't think they can work quickly enough, and I don't think they can work efficiently enough to solve this problem. And I think it's a lot to ask when we've been going to the voters, and as a town meeting member, I talk to a lot of voters, to continue to go to them for overrides, and to ask them for literally the most expensive way to possibly do this. I'm also really concerned about the idea of mega schools, about 1,200 more students on a site. I think that large schools, I agree with Perry here, I think that large schools are a bigger impediment to building community in schools than how one gets to school. And I'm particularly concerned about children who need additional attention getting lost in a school that large, whether it be a student with an IEP or students who need IEPs and the special education staff being able to respond to that, or students who need extra challenge and just not being able to get into those programs or have that in their classroom. So I really hope that the boards will return to the idea of a ninth school that will solve our problems. And I certainly do think that we need to be concerned about schools that need renovation. But the most important problem that we have to solve right now is our capacity issue. So go do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Tal Kennett, and after Ms. Kennett, Andrew Shallett.
Hi, Tal Kennett, Pierce parent. So first of all, I really do appreciate all your work on this. Perry, I believe Parsons, which I love, last been estimated at about 90 million at a lower bound based on the purchase for the high school. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, and could be more because it belongs to a nonprofit. So probably above your own line. I want to also say that I support all the arguments so far in favor of walkable schools. But I want to focus on something else today. You've seen me here speaking a bunch of times in support of things. I want to actually speak against something today, and I want to speak against Article 97. And Neil, you've already mentioned a lot of the issues, but I'd like to really stress it because I'm not sure everybody understands the delays that Article 97 actually incurs. People have heard here an estimate of 26 months delay in a 9th school that is in an Article 97 site. That is a everything goes according to plan delay. We have never yet encountered an everything goes according to plan case in this town. And if this be the first, it would be wonderful, but I doubt it. I was going to read the 6 steps to get there, but that was for a 5-minute talk, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to only outline 2 of them. First, that identifying a land by itself is already proven very difficult. And the second is that step 3 is to demonstrate in writing that all options to avoid use of Article 97 land have been explored and no alternatives have been found. But we've already demonstrated in writing that we have alternatives. So I have no idea how we're going to get through that one. If somebody has a thought on that, I'd love to know. And I'd also love to stress out that many of the steps do not involve just the town, but involve the state, and these are completely out of our hands. I think 26 months is a really optimistic estimate. So for those of you who are here to advocate for the fastest possible solution, an Article 97 site is probably not it. I want to make that clear. Now, if we rule out Article 97, we are left with 2 options, Expend in Place and Baldwin North.
Pine Manor.
And Pine Manor. Pine Manor, people have already talked about the time delays with that. Feasibility, we don't know much about that, and potentially lawsuits and issues with a hostile takeover. If that can be fast, I'm willing to get on board. I'm really willing to get on board with a lot of things that are fast. Baldwin North, if that is feasible, I'm willing to get on board with that. I know that there's a lot of feasibility questions about it. If those 2, Pine Manor within a quick timeline, Pine Manor feasible in 6 years doesn't count. Pine Manor feasible now counts. Pine Manor or Baldwin North are ruled not feasible or not feasible in a quick timeline, we are left with Expend in Place. And once we've ruled out the impossible, we are left with the feasible. And the feasible would be Expend in Place. And I'd like to lastly stress that we've been down this path before. We keep ending with Expend in Place and ruling it out and trying for a 9th school. Maybe we should just listen to history and go with it.
Mr. Shallot and then Linda Roseman.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Shallot. I have 2 kids at Pierce, 6th grader and a 1st grader. I want to start by thanking all the committee members for your thick skin and your stamina. Your faces have changed over the last 6 or 8 years that I've been coming to these meetings, but really I appreciate your work. I think I want to start by saying I hope we can get to a place where we have a 10 or 15 year plan for our schools. I think David Pollack did a really good job of laying out what the capital needs are for our K-8 schools over the next 15 years. It's important to look at that because we can pretend that it's cheaper to build a 9th school at the far end of town, but that ignores the renovation needs that aren't going to go away. And renovation doesn't mean something fancy. It means really schools that are in very bad shape. These are acknowledged needs that have already been put off for a decade or more, and that will need to be addressed. And David, I think you did a great job of laying out the costs of the various renovation needs that are coming in the next 10 or 15 years and how those fit with providing added capacity along with the various options for new sites. Once you have that 15 or 20-year framework, then the question is, what order do you do the pieces in? The first meeting I came to, it was when B-Space was happening. I don't know how many years that was. I mapped from my house to Driscoll and Devotion and Pierce walking, and it was exactly 0.6 miles to all three of those schools. Tonight, I went through the exercise of mapping from the Putterham site to all the schools, and the closest one was Baker, which was 0.8 miles, and all the others were more than a mile. The point of that is the first building that we do should be at the location that will alleviate the overcrowding at the greatest number of schools with the least disruption possible. Other people have spoken to the fact that if we build the new school, the first new school, or the first additional capacity at Putterham, there'll be this knock-on effect of redistricting and redistricting and redistricting. There are other options that address it in a better fashion. I'd refer you to Mariah's memo, which is very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Roseman, and after Ms. Roseman is Dave Gasak.
Good evening. I'm Linda Roseman, town meeting member, Precinct 14, and very close neighbor to the Heath School where my 4 children graduated from. I'm here to speak in favor of what I'll refer to as the no-brega proposal, which Mr. Offner described in detail. I won't re-describe it. In other words, I'm in favor of expanding and renovating Driscoll, Pierce, and either Baker or Heath School. It seems clear to me that there is a great deal of support in town for maintaining community-based schools. Parents seem willing to send their children to very large schools in order to keep the neighborhood option. The school, formerly known as Devotion, is a clear example of a school community that overwhelmingly supported a very large school in order to keep it in the neighborhood. I'm a strong believer in keeping schools in the local communities where children live whenever possible. On a practical note, I believe the no-brega proposal will garner the most support when it's time to bring another override to the voters. Putterham, Pine Manor, and Baldwin are options that have already ignited strong opposition and legal challenges and will undoubtedly result in an organized anti-override effort. To put it bluntly, the no-brega proposal is the most politically viable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gasak, and then Nathan Spritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Gayshock, Heath Dad, and a member of the, I believe, still existent but defunct Ninth School Building Committee, hopefully not defunct for long. I want to echo what Ms. Jetty said. Thank you to all of you for all of the hard work that you have done and continue to do in this process. This is not easy. We would have solved this a long time ago if it was. This doesn't reduce itself well to sound bites because there are so many moving parts, and when you squeeze one part of the balloon, 3 other things change. So thank you for dealing with all that complexity and hearing all of us out. You've heard a lot of support tonight, and you'll hear more for walkable neighborhood schools. You'll hear a lot of concern tonight about people being redistricted out of their walkable neighborhood schools. This didn't start tonight. In fact, Chairman Wyszynski knows better than most on this board because the B-Space Committee, of which he was a key part, and I believe others here may have participated, did a deep analysis back in 2013 of potential school options, and one of the leading indicators, one of the key factors that well thought out, in-depth report looked at was what would the effect of various school options be on our walkable neighborhood schools. In fact, one school, Baldwin, coincidentally, was rejected as an option by B-Space for just that reason, because it would disrupt walkability and districting across multiple school communities for the reason that so few kids live close to that part of town. That hasn't changed. We just swept it to the side for a while, not saying in bad faith, but for the last 2 years we've kind of pretended it didn't exist. It exists. People in this room are evidence that it exists. Emails and letters you're getting are evidence that it exists. This is not a red herring issue, as some have said. This is a real issue for many. It will be a political issue in passing town meeting and passing an override if it's not given thoughtful consideration now. So where does that leave us? We're solving for two things in terms of our capacity needs. We're solving for kids who are here now, and I've sent you a number of cuts and analyses that show very clearly those kids are heavily, heavily weighted in North Brookline. And we're solving for kids who we expect to come in the future. Those kids are roughly 50-50 north and south, and the south part is dependent entirely on when Hancock Village expands and how big it gets. Two big unknowns that I don't think we have on our near horizon right now. Let's start with one step. Let's start with Driscoll, and then let's move to Pierce, and then let's, yes, solve South Brookline as well. But let's do it in the order where we have the existing, time-sensitive, and bigger need, not the reverse. Thank you.
Mr. Spritz, and then Alon Wipinski.
So my name's Nathan Spritz, and I'm a baker dad of 2 kids, 6th graders. My name's Nathan Spritz, and I'm a baker dad of 2 6th graders. I'm just going to try to read this as fast as I can before it starts with his timer. We all know the history. We've added over 1,750 students to our school system in the past 10 years, and we've increased our enrollment in our elementary schools from 4,098 students to 5,482 students, an increase of 1,384 kids. That's almost exactly equal to adding another Baker and Driscoll to the system. We are not as familiar about the future. In the next 5 years, our system will have 5,869 students, an additional 387 kids. That's another 2 sections. That's 9 classes, 21 kids per classroom times 2. That's a need of 18 new classrooms that are needed just to stay equal to where we are right now in terms of overcrowding. That's 18 classrooms. Our whole system is overcrowded, and we need relief now. If we can assume that we can deliver a project in a 5-year time frame, we can build a new 3-section, 27-classroom K-8 building with an additional 9 extra classrooms to help out with rise overcrowding, language learners, and BEEP. 27 classrooms is 9 more than is needed to stay level and actually makes a dent in our overcrowding. Additionally, 3 rise classrooms help alleviate some stress at Runkle and better serve these students. 3 ELL classrooms can be used to reduce stress from packing in language learners into one of our other buildings, to be determined. We also have schools, including Pierce, that would really benefit from renovations, and the conditions in those schools are exacerbated by overcrowding. If we choose to do Pierce first, which some Pierce parents are asking for, we may not quite deliver the solution we are trying to. With projected growth on top of current overcrowding, it only makes sense to construct a 6-section Pierce. But that only nets us, from David Pollock's memo, 13 new classrooms, actually losing ground against the need of 18 new classrooms, which I talked about before. We would wind up 5 years hence netting a -5 classrooms and be worse off system-wide than we are right now. I'm not really sure that this is what anyone really has in mind with a renovation for Pierce, overcrowded before it opens. The other alternative, Driscoll first, adds 9 classrooms, and that's a net loss against the 18 that we need of 9 classrooms, a net 9 loss. And it still leaves Pierce waiting. So I'm not sure that that works any better as intended either. We know that Putterham is cheaper, but all other objectives aside, it's faster. And faster would be a really good word to enter into our vocabulary about schools right now. From a timing perspective, a 9th school is the only way to go. For the Pierce community, this may seem as if we're dealing with a chronic problem first, that only helps their acute issues tangentially. I would say this, a Pierce 6-section solution will be overcrowded on day one, but a 9th school now will help to depopulate all schools and make the remaining time until an MSBA partnered renovation go a whole lot better. I'd like to thank everybody here for listening to me and listening to everybody too. I know it's been a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wapinski, and then Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Hi, I'm Ilan Wapinski. I'm a parent of one Pierce parent and an incoming, one Pierce kid and one incoming Pierce kid as well. So, Mr. Wyszynski, you'll be happy to hear that a lot of the points that I would like to make have already been made.
Thank
so I'll
you.
move on to other points just briefly. So I actually wanted to address some of the people in the room that are not the select board, the school committee, the advisory committee. I want to address the rest of the community because I do think that everyone acknowledges, as people have said already, this group of people is thinking very hard about this problem. We all recognize it's very complex, and what everybody, I think, wants to say and wants to get behind is some decision and some action. We don't think, most of us don't think, that any one decision is going to be the end of our town. It's not going to be the end of walkable neighborhoods. It's not going to be the addition of an unsafe school in some part of town. It's not going to be any of those things. It might not be our first choice. It might not be our favorite choice. But most of us are relatively agnostic about what solution gets chosen, as long as there's a solution that's chosen and that we move forward to building that solution. So that's all I want to say, and I think that the rest of the community here will help you guys in fulfilling that, and we'll work hard on whatever override needs to get passed. And so thank you for all the work.
Thank you. Ms. Olson-Pelkey, and then David Pantalone.
Oh, it's the too tall thing again.
Or you can take it off.
Thank you. Linda Olson-Pelkey. Linda Olson-Pelkey. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 2. I do not have children in the schools, so I'm a bit of an anomaly here, I think. I want to say, let's see, I'm going to say what I've agreed with and disagreed with. I disagreed with the gentleman who spoke right before me because I think people have very strong feelings about this. I agree with the Nobrega proposal. I agree with trying to keep walkable schools. I think it's absolutely critical. I agree that you will not have the political support if you go with another Article 97 idea. I don't know why we keep doing that. It's, you know, I see the value of the values of our community, and I see that this process is taking us away from it. And I've always been waiting through this whole process for everyone to come together and say, we have to think about the whole town and what's best for everyone. And I don't think that we're always doing that because we go down the rabbit hole of building boxes and how big can the box be and how much is it going to cost all the time. So I would just like to remind us about what I think our values are. They are walkability, and it's about the future, because we're not all going to be driving around with petrochemical cars for very much longer. They're on the way out. So I think we should stop thinking that way. We care about sustainability. So why would we want to flatten large acreages of mature forest when we're caring about protecting trees? And I think we do care about community, and I think community is fostered by neighborhood schools. I see it when I'm out walking in my neighborhood, all the kids with their moms and dads on scooters and bikes walking to the school. It's a beautiful thing, and we have to maintain that. And I think if you want to work on this problem and build more space, that's how we have to do it. I just have a few little things about the projections. I'm kind of a numbers gal. Have I reached my time? Okay. What I've seen is the enrollment has started leveling off in terms of incoming kindergartens. We've also seen that there's been a lowering of the number of small young children. And I don't think we've heard about the projections, which seem to be based on the MSBA space standards, even though we're not getting MSBA money, so I would hope there would be a little creativity around that. And it just seems that we're, maybe it's prudent planning, but we're forecasting based on the absolute upside of everything that could happen and not thinking about what some of the downsides are. I mean, obviously, housing is super expensive here. It makes it cheaper to live here if you don't have to buy a car. And that's another reason to maintain the walkable schools. It helps diversify our economy. So Neil's asked me to stop, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Pantalone. And then Tommy Vitolo be up next.
Hi, Dave Pantalone, Precinct 7. I've been a resident of this town now for 37 years. I had 2 kids go through the school system decades ago. I basically have 3 points. I object a little bit to the, I object a lot actually, to the way the cost presentation was made tonight. We saw a set of figures on the cost of a ninth school and the fact that it would add 27, add to the capacity by 27. We then saw a combination of renovate and add capacity, all of which had high costs because you were both renovating and adding capacity. I don't think it's a fair comparison to present the nice school, which appears to add so much more capacity at so much less cost, and ignore the fact that even if you build the ninth school, you're still going to have to spend money at the other schools that were mentioned, the Driscolls, the Pierces, the Bakers. It is not a fair presentation to present ninth school costs without also including with those costs the cost of doing the renovation at the other schools, which you are going to have to do. And because all of this is expensive, we hear as Neil said, something's got to give, and the concerns about future cost and tax overrides and so forth. Well, folks, life is expensive. Life is expensive. Get used to it. We have a combination of social, economic, political, and environmental factors, all of which are going to raise the cost of living in the future. It's not something you can avoid. So let's accept the fact that life is expensive. A no higher cost future is not an option. It's not an option. Smell the coffee, folks. And thirdly, I care a lot about long-range, comprehensive, quality solutions. I don't like short-range, myopic thinking, cheap and dirty solutions, which are not really solutions at all, except unless you predefine the problem very narrowly, like it's a capacity problem. As you know, as a co-chair of Climate Action Brookline, I care about the environment. I'm a realist. I know that survival is expensive. You get what you pay for, and survival is not a guarantee. I'm totally supportive of the Driscoll, Pierce, Baker approach, and I'm willing to pay more, even though I don't have any kids in the system anymore.
Thank you. Mr. Vitolo, and then Tim Yu.
Tommy Vitolo, town meeting member, Precinct 6, and candidate for state representative. Just over a year ago, I stood at the podium in town meeting and argued for warrant Article 21 to build net zero energy schools, both BHS and 9th. I emphasized Baldwin because a little over a year ago, I was strongly in support of Baldwin. Not meant to be. Pine Manor. I mean, we need the classrooms, right? And we'd been told over and over again that the Pierce renovation would cost as much as the New York Yankees' annual payroll. So sure, Pine Manor, not meant to be. And here we are again, in search of a single-site solution. For that is what we were prejudged to need, a single-site solution. My son Felice is finishing up first grade at Pierce, the school that we universally agree is in dire need of a major renovation, the school with substandard infrastructure, the school that can't be made ADA compliant without a wrecking ball. Driscoll is said to be the clear runner-up, but who knows, maybe the kids there like eating lunch at 10:30 in the morning. School Committee Chair David Pollock's memo, dated May 29th, has crystallized my thoughts. Chairman Pollock writes that we must, quote, maximize capacity with the first project, end quote. That's the thing to do. Doesn't matter if doing so exacerbates the inequity with Pierce, a school that has a 50% higher rate of economically disadvantaged kids than the aggregate of the remaining K through 8s. Doesn't matter that the needs for classrooms in North Brookline is more acute than South Brookline, and with a discrepancy that is expected to exacerbate. Doesn't matter that for many North Brookline families, walking to school is the only way they can get there, and being redistricted to a school farther away is an everyday hardship, beginning with those oh-so-short legs of 5-year-old kindergartners. Our town needs classroom capacity, but that's an oversimplification. We have 3 distinct needs: classroom capacity in South Brookline, classroom capacity in North Brookline, and renovations for Pierce and Driscoll. We can put together a plan that locks in addressing all 3 of those needs, right? Well, no. Mr. Pollock writes that we must make, quote, one decision at a time, end quote. If we can't make a decision that builds the needed capacity for Sobro in South Brookline, the needed capacity for Nobro in North Brookline, and that appropriately prioritizes renovations for Pierce and Driscoll, well, then my one decision is easy. 2/3 of town meeting is needed for bonding, and it's an awfully tough hill to climb when you lose the verdant vista-preserving TMMs in precincts 14 and 15, lose some subset of the precinct 4, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, and 13 TMMs concerned that their neighborhood Pierce and Driscoll situation is to remain inequitable for another decade, lose some Green Space Alliance and Green Caucus TMMs townwide, and lose a handful of TMMs who value lower taxes to more classrooms anywhere. A third proposal for 25-plus classroom K-8 school in South Brookline is a third proposal to be back here in 6 months to a year. Thank you.
Mr. Yu, and then Don Lika.
Hi, folks. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you for the prompt. My name is Tim Yu. I am in Precinct 16. I'm a Baker dad. I have 3 girls, 1 in first grade and 2 in pre-K. They're going to be going to Baker in 2 years. I'm hearing a number of things in the room tonight. I'm hearing, am I not pointed at it? Thank you. I'm hearing a number of things tonight. I'm hearing a lot of frustration in the room. I'm hearing a lot of anger. And I'm understanding very well that there is urgent need for renovations at many of our schools, and especially at Pierce. And I understand the plight is serious. As far as I'm concerned, you can hand me one of those Pierce buttons. I support a renovation at Pierce. I'm also hearing a number of other things, some that I don't agree with. I'm hearing some concerns about a 9th school, that we are chasing a 9th school because it is the new shiny. I completely disagree with that. I am a Baker dad, as I mentioned. We live close to Baker. I'll tell you that I'm pretty darn sure, based on where we live, that no matter what move we make, our kids are going to be going to Baker. They won't be going to a new shiny. And I still support a 9th school in South Brookline. Let me tell you why. I simply cannot justify spending $137 million to renovate and upgrade Baker. Let me pause for a second. That's not NIMBY. My kids will be going there. I would love a freshly renovated school. But if you tell me that you could, for that same money, build a school someplace else in South Brookline, at Putterham, for instance, and pocket $40 million for the town to do and put forth for other worthy projects, for instance, the next needed school renovation, perhaps for schools whose parents aren't in the room, then how could I, as a citizen, say no? Let's also talk about concerns about walkability. There's a concern that Putterham will add too many classrooms. Gosh, what a problem. Too many classrooms. So for the $30 million less than the cost of adding 8 classrooms at Baker, we could have 19 classrooms coming essentially for free. How can we as a town turn that down responsibly? Let's talk about the Nebraga plan. I actually support the Nebraga plan. Let's talk about it. Pierce, Baker, Driscoll. I have one modification. Based on what I just said, let's strongly consider Putterham instead of Baker. It's a more efficient move. It addresses needs with some challenges, but it is an opportunity to save our citizens a lot of money. How can we not pursue it?
Please conclude.
Thank you.
Mr. Lika?
Don Lika.
Adrian Bowman next.
Don Lika, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3, and member of the Green Caucus. My first task here is to remind this group of the SMART growth principles, which were sent to you and adopted by the Green Caucus and commended to you. That has to do with not using open space and building buildings where the need is, just to summarize. I would like to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Pantalone. The figures that you see before you are misleading because the costs of Putterham do not include the inevitable costs of Pierce and Driscoll. I'd also like to associate myself with the remarks of Tommy Vitolo to say that a speculative Article 97 crapshoot with Putterham is not going to have the support that you will need for an override. I suggest to you that an override is sold on the merits of what you're presenting to the people, which is why the high school renovation, which was imaginative and bold, did pass. If you really do not have a vision that you can show, it will be difficult to sell that against the town, and you may find yourself with some opposition that you would not otherwise expect. In short, I would suggest to you that the Nebraga is a no-brainer.
Ms. Bowman and Sarah Griffin after Ms. Bowman.
Hi, my name is Adrian Bowman, and I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 16. I have 2 children, one who's at first grade at Baker and one who will be at Baker shortly. I've heard the arguments for walkability, but maintain that walkable schools and neighborhood schools differ. I grew up in Brookline, and I know it's shocking, I took a bus to Baker, even though I lived firmly in the Baker district, and am now an educator myself. 4 of my current closest friends I met in kindergarten at Baker. My point is that going to a walkable school does not determine the quality of one's educational experience in Brookline. As far as I know, there have been no formal studies, maps, or surveys created by the town that would make this our determining factor right now. But I digress. I have been advocating for a site in South Brookline for years now, but I personally have been beaten down by this process. I don't know how you all are staying with this still. I no longer care where the school is built, but I care that a 9th school is built. We need capacity, and we need it now. This is not a uniquely North or South problem. It's a Brookline problem. Parsing out percentages of students here or there or drawing maps distracts from the fundamental need that got us here in the first place. We need a new school. Merely expanding our current schools will, by necessity, be more costly and time-consuming, as students are currently learning in those spaces. In addition, an expansion-only project will leave no buffer to prevent this same scenario from reemerging in years to come. The only difference will be that 1,000 student elementary schools will be the norm, and we'll be forced to expand on top of that. If we build a new school and then right-size renovate our schools in desperate need, as in option 1D of the May 29th Pollock memo, we will hit the reset button. We will solve our problem and then some. So if in years to come our population continues to grow, we can look to expand our current schools. I strongly urge the Select Board and School Committee to look at option 1D and build a new school for now and for the future sake of our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin, and is Michael Berger still here? I thought I saw. Okay. You'll be up. You're on deck, Mike.
Hi, thank you very much for being here once again tonight. It has been a long process. I'm Sarah Griffin, the Baker parent for a 4th and 5th grader. And I want to kind of step back and say, so what's important about what we're trying to do here? It's the building, but it's what's inside the building, as somebody said earlier, that's important. It's the education for our kids. I'm very focused on equity and closing achievement gaps, and good schools inside are what matters, and outside. So what are the ingredients for that success besides academics, which this is not the point of? I would say number one, I've said it here before, safety, that children cannot learn. This is a learning principle. Children can't learn if they don't feel safe, if they have a sense of community and belonging, if they have the ability to move around. We're talking about K through 8, not high school. They need the ability to get outside, to interact with their peers, to learn how to do that social emotional, and to get the gross motor. And I think Expand in Place doesn't do that, doesn't do any of these things. It puts more building on the same footprints with more children, and they're not going to have as much space to be able to go out and do the kind of social emotional and play that they need. I actually think it could decrease the sense of community. Let me talk briefly about our experience at Baker. As Baker has expanded up and become overcrowded, it has been harder to maintain a sense of community with 700 children in the building. It is hard for parents to find each other. It's hard for kids to feel like it's a community. So I actually think smaller schools build that sense of community regardless of where you live. The ninth school offers, a ninth school somewhere, I agree with Adrian, somewhere, offers more play space, more open space for the school. It also maintains space at the existing schools for that same goal. And there's less crowding, which I think really does contribute to increased safety, which brings about better learning outcomes and helps us to have all of our children learn well and to close the achievement gap. The last thing I would say is just the note on cost, which is, I think about we're going to have to sell this override to voters. I was out on the pavement for the last override, the last month, and I think that the amount, when I talked to voters, when I was door knocking, they were concerned about the percentage increase, and if we can do more with bricks and mortar in an affordable way, we're going to have a better chance at override. And lastly, I would say we had to have an operating override to support the schools this time, to bring in some of the equity outcomes we want and some of the basic things we need for our schools. We may need that again. I would rather see money in an operating override go to quality instruction and go to things that will help to build better outcomes inside the building than to the bricks and mortar. And I think we need to keep that in consideration as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Berger and Nancy Daly's up next.
Good evening. I'm Michael Berger, resident of Walcott Road, former town meeting member, precinct 15 and 16, for 29 years. I was one of the founders of the Brookline Green Space Alliance, a former member of Park and Rec, and was a representative on several open space plans. My children attended Baker School and Brookline High School. Putterham Woods. I'm really opposed to the building of a night school in Putterham Woods. It's curious that this particular option surfaced so late in the site evaluation. It's been a long process. Every selection so far that was proposed had opposition from some interest groups. But who speaks for Putterham Woods? Right, the trees. Right? Quiet. Only the trees. There are no playground advocates, no playing field advocates, no residents. It's kind of stuck in the middle of nowhere, but it is somewhere. And it offers to the residents of Brookline a great resource. But we've come to this particular space with no apparent advocates. I'm here to speak for the woods themselves, which is a resource for Brookline and open space and wildlife. I would urge you to beware the map. It's 2 dimensions. It's boxes. Beware the plans and the drawings, and above all, beware the swap. Because open space in one area is not the same as open space in another area. You heard the effect the trees have as a buffer in terms of the fire training facility. Also, there are wetlands near the trees as well. And I think they play an important part of maintaining the hydrological condition. The maps, the swaps, the abstractions really do not represent what the trees are. This is an ecosystem, not only to Brookline, but to our grandchildren, to our future generations. And it brings to the community something that Brookline is committed to: diversity. Diversity in people, diversity in our environment. There are different areas of Brookline that are very different, and that's a strength that this community has. So, Putterham Woods is not a rectangle on a map, not vacant land, but it's a resource that stands today for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Daly and then Michelle Morrissey.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Daly. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 12 and a former member of the Board of Selectmen for 12 years. And I was involved in a number of school projects in my role as a select board person, or I'm not sure what you're calling yourselves these days. But I want to say that I fully agree that Pierce School needs to be completely renovated. To give you some history, I was the selectman on the Runkle School project, and we said at the time that Pierce would have been a higher priority, except we didn't think we could add extra classrooms at Pierce, and we did at Runkle. I am concerned about the concept of expanding Pierce dramatically. I think of all the school sites in town, that one is particularly challenging, and it would end up being, there are a lot of factors, I think, not fully realized yet that would make that a very expensive expansion. I think it should be renovated. I'm not concerned about the expansion. I want to bring up an idea that I think I was alone on when a joint meeting like this of the Board of Selectmen and the school committee in voting for several years ago, but you guys have moved along and some new people, so maybe it will be received a little more in a more different manner this time. I think you should really be looking at the old Lincoln School. It's been a school forever. The building is already there. It resolves some of the Green Caucus's issues. It's actually a very nice building. It would have to be expanded. But the high school is going to be out of there in a few years as they get their expansion. And while it has been a valuable swing space for us, I think we learned with the lower devotion on Webster Street that we can use other spaces for swing space. So I think that I'm not going to say that there wouldn't be some neighbors who would object. There are neighbors all over Brookline who object to things in their neighborhood. So, but I think that since that has been a school building for many years, even if expanded, it would be received more kindly perhaps than some of the other locations that have been mentioned. And I think it's in a great location to help with overcrowding at Pierce, but also since it's on the south side of Route 9 to help with some of the issues at the Baker School.
Thank you. Ms. Morrissey and Ethan Treisman.
I am a current Baker parent, and I'm a member of the school site council at Baker. My husband and I bought our house in 2010 for one reason, the Baker School. Specifically because it had two things. It was extremely high achieving, and it was extremely diverse, and that's what we wanted for our kids. That's why we moved to Brookline. We didn't move to Brookline for mega elementary schools. And as an educator myself, I cannot understand how this is the conversation that we are having in this town that so prizes the excellence of its schools. It's not a good idea. Kids will get lost in schools that large. This isn't conjecture. The research supports what I'm telling you. Here's what it says. It's complicated. For a lot of kids, a big school is maybe not that bad. But for our most vulnerable and high-needs students, the research is actually quite clear that smaller schools are significantly more successful for them. I'm talking about low-income students, and I'm talking about students who have special needs. As a Baker parent, I am genuinely proud that under Massachusetts' accountability system, Baker is a level 1 school. Just to explain what that means, that's not achievement overall. That means that Baker is quickly closing the gaps that exist between traditionally underserved populations and white students. And that's a big deal to me. I think that's great. Why? How can we put that at risk to create extremely large schools here in Brookline, and why? Why would we do that? Let's talk a little bit about some research, again, about what makes schools great. We know what that is: strong teachers, high expectations, a system that can intervene when a kid is not doing well. I could keep going. Rich and varied curriculum. Here's what doesn't make the list: how a child arrives at school in the morning and how close to the building they live. Look, I get about 5 to 10 days a year where I drop my kids in the building, and I love it. It's wonderful. But what determines the quality and the excellence of their education is what happens after I walk away. Change is really hard. Those of you sitting up here listening to us tonight, we don't envy you, but you've taken on these leadership roles, and you have to help us get through this. We are a community that is really struggling with this change, and we need your leadership here. I support a 9th school, but I have to tell you, we need to hear from you now.
Thank you. Mr. Treisman and Susan Jacobs after Mr. Treisman.
Hi, I'm a Pierce father for many years and many years to come, it feels like. I agree with the last speaker, but I also want to speak in opposition to the Pierce expansion. I know there's a vocal group here that is in support of it, and I appreciate their passion. I know there's a bunch of us who are opposed to it. And I think the plan has come out of this this passion that we have for Pierce, which is really a dump. It's full of diamonds, but it's a dump. And so we have this real passion to have something done, anything done. And it's gotten to the point where someone says, hey, we'll add 200 kids, but you get a renovation. We go, all right, I'll take 200 kids, 200 more kids. Your kindergartner will need a compass and a map to find their way to class. Fine, fine, as long as we can go to the bathroom without a hazmat suit and go to an auditorium all at once instead of in shifts. We'll have to buy a bunch of new buildings in the area, and we'll lose the K through 8 model, but you'll still be able to walk there. And I think that we're all just kind of like so desperate for something to be done to the school that we're willing to accept all sorts of conditions. But if you step back from a second and think, how did this whole process start? When we were dealing with the overcrowding, the most obvious and the first option was a night school. And I hope you guys don't lose sight of that. I still think the night school is the best option. I'm with my Pierce brothers and sisters in desperation for some renovations. And I really hope they happen, because I've had one kid go through with the current, and if we get renovations, I'll have a kid who gets to enjoy the renovations. But I think the real long-term and lasting solution is with a new school and then renovations in the future, hopefully the near future, but in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs, and after Ms. Jacobs, do I see Ms. Jacobs? Sarah Stoutland? And after Ms. Stoutland, Anita Fink?
So my name is Sarah Stoutland. I have 3 children. 2 of them went through the Brookline Public Schools of Brookline, and 1 who's an 8th grader at Driscoll. My youngest has been and will be in an overcrowded school from K to 12. I've been living Brookline's need for expansion for 10 years. I'm here to read a petition signed by 500 residents concerned about our overcrowded schools, all of our overcrowded schools. One of the things I want to just make a couple comments of. The school expansion has been full with NIMBYs and YIMBYs. Neither is productive. I do not take issue with the no or the yes. I take issue with the my backyard, my school, my neighborhood. This process needs to be about all our schools, all our neighborhoods, and all our residents. And I ask you as select board and school committee members who you are elected to a town-wide office, it is your duty to honestly balance the values and needs of Brookline schools and town as a whole. I also want to address that the overcrowding in our schools, for all of it, is a multi-site solution. I haven't heard anyone talk about a single-site solution. This is a multi-site solution, and the solutions will need to include necessary school renovations, particularly in Pierce and Driscoll. But before us today is the decision on which site to move forward on first. This is what our petition addresses. It has been signed by many parents in each K-8 school and by many in Precinct 15. All 500 of us would like to say, Chair Walensky, Chair Pollack, and members of the Select Board and School Committee. The path to enlarging our school buildings to fit 1,700 more students has been long and difficult. The town is finally able to move forward quickly. The high school expansion has been funded. Now we need to move ahead on solving our K-8 overcrowding. We believe the next step is to move ahead with a new K-8 school at the Putteram site. The site will provide us with the most classrooms, 27 more, in the shortest amount of time at the lowest cost, with the least disruption to students. Most importantly, it will substantially ease the crowding in all our schools while creating a wonderful new school. We know there are obstacles, a land swap, politics, legislative processes, lawyers of the IMBYs putting up hurdles at every step. We ask you, please, to step up and lead our town. Choose to move the Putteram site forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fink, and after Ms. Fink is Dan Lyons.
Hello, my name is Anita Fink. I moved to South Brookline 5 years ago for the school system. I'm a mother of a soon-to-be kindergartner who will be 4th generation South Brookliner. I have a 2-part question concerning the feasibility studies. With all the feasibility studies that were conducted over time, were any of the feasibility studies that were conducted on, the impact of the surrounding neighborhoods, the safety of the children, the safety of the drivers, the impact of rerouting traffic and traffic patterns, or the impact on the environment. Also, with the feasibility studies, I was wondering if there was a feasibility study that was conducted on building a new building versus the expansion of the other existing schools. With building the 9th school, my major concern is, will it meet future demand? Based on the numbers that were given in the documentation, the proposed Putterham site will have 640 seats. Based on an average growth, I just did some quick math, of 99 seats per year. In 5 years, that's 498 seats. In 6 years, that's 594. 7 years, it's 693. Doesn't quite meet the needs of our future capacity. I just want to make sure, based on these projections, they're taking that in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lyons, Gerald Lazar. Arlene Heinlich, Chris Kubran, Jim Rourke. I'm sorry. You're Chris Kubran? Okay. And Jim Rourke is up next? Oh, Dan Lyons is out there? No? Okay.
Watching people stumble over this all night. Hi, my name's Chris Coburn, and I have two children at Driscoll, a second grader and a kindergartner, and I have a third child that will be going there in 3 years' time. I am not going to take up much of your time. I'm going to just very simply state I do not know what happened in the past with Driscoll as an expansion site, as a site for renovation, but I can tell you right now that myself, my friends, and the people that I talk to are firmly in support of Driscoll being a part of this solution anyway, anyhow it needs to happen. As Tommy Vitolo mentioned, my daughter eats breakfast at 10:15 in the morning. I didn't know this when my son went there, so he would come home starving at 2:30, and I had absolutely no idea why. It's desperately in need there. I know we have needs everywhere, but please, Driscoll will support this, and I want to make that very clear to everyone on the stage, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Rourke. Then after Mr. Rourke is Sarah Bleck.
Jim Rourke, Precinct 15, town meeting member, virtually a lifelong resident. Sent one of my kids through the schools. I've been to 1 million of these meetings. And it's not what you're doing, it's how you've done it. Confidence in you and trust erodes because you've misrepresented yourselves, you've been duplicitous, and people don't trust you. And all you have to do is look at the last election. It was a strong, Richard Nagel made a strong run. He's part of this whole thing. And the thing, I watched the presentation, and again, it was more of it. You were led to this conclusion, all right, that the 9th school, and Neil, you and I talked about this today at the elections. If you build it, they will come. Did I get that quote right? And I've seen, the underhanded, sneaky, duplicitous things, but I got to tell you, when you went after the poor monks, all right, Jesus Christ, they've been there for 50 years, all right, and I don't know if you know what goes on in a monastery, but it's where people go to be alone, all right? They don't want a pristine little park. And that letter was so patronizing. I read it. It looked like somebody's letter to Santa, all right? It was just dreadful. And that traffic study, we both know how that goes. You give them an objective, and they build a plan around it. I must have been to 200 planning board meetings. As soon as I saw Van Ness Associates, I knew. And whoever wrote that, all right, has a problem with opiates because they don't, not once did we see the Beaver Country Day mentioned in the thing. They want to put new lights in at Laurel Road and Hammond Street. Right? I'll be done in a minute. All right, but I've worked in a lot of campaigns for a lot of people, all right? I've opened my wallet. I expect more from the people who should be exemplars to children, all right? And this kind of behavior, all right, is not exemplary, all right? You should be ashamed of yourselves. People are disgusted with the way things have been going here, all right? You're not bad people. I think you're just misguided. You're determined to put a school at Putnam Woods, and you will stop at nothing in order to put it there, all right? Even bothering the poor monks who want to be alone, all right? It's an act of desperation. And I thought the Baldwin School was settled. It's not going to happen. The Sewell, billionaires got together, opened their wallet, and they crushed your necks, all right? That wasn't going to happen. Then you were going to go over and dispossess the kids at Pine Manor. That's not going to happen. So by virtue of elimination, there's only one thing that can happen. All right? Get your act together here.
Ms. Bleck? Aaron Williams? And Sasson Zelka after that?
Boy, that's a tough one to follow. Sorry. First off, I want to thank the Select Board and the school committee, wow, this is really loud, for putting this together and taking the time to do all this. I really appreciate it. When you're making a decision on which site to proceed with, please look at not the immediate, but at the education of the future. In any of these options, my child will not be the winner. We have an amazing teaching staff and administrators. I'm a Pierce parent. My daughters are in second and kindergarten. We have an amazing teaching staff and administrators, so I have no doubt that they will get an amazing education despite location. But we can look to the future and work towards creating the best school system that we can. I want to create a legacy here that will enhance our education system and our town. The size of school matters. Any of the options that encourage a school body of 1,100 children is too large. Building an 1,100 plus student school with 6 sections creates an unequal school compared to the others in the district that have 500 children. I'm working with 2 ECS coordinators at the Pierce Makerspace, and the way that they're able to make the resources work for a school of 900 kids is nowhere near the way that they make it work with smaller schools. It's just, logistics are just crazy with it. Sorry, I just lost my place. It's just logistics. Just the sheer number of children makes it impossible. 6 sections are too large, and when there are still 3 and 4 section schools in the district. It creates an unequal education gap. Comparatively, logistics of 2 schools on one site sharing outdoor space seems incredibly difficult logistically, and somewhat of a security concern for our children because the mixing of the kids and how do you get them back is a question I had with it. If there becomes shared resources, then it basically becomes a 6-section school under the guise of 2 3-section schools. The quality of education matters. Keeping our schools is smaller. I'm just going to refer to the woman who spoke before about smaller schools are better education for kids. There's been studies out there, and numerous studies about it. A timeline matters to a point is the other thing I was going to say. All of these options now will affect my children, whether it's in swing space or in an old Pierce building. I want to reiterate what Ethan said about people wanting renovations for the Pierce building, but I'm not willing to sell the cow for new building. I think that it's important for the education of the children and the children of the future. Even if we get a renovation in 10 years, my kids will be in the high school already. I hope to have a nice Pierce school for my grandkids, hopefully, and the future kids that go there. I feel that the best way to achieve this is a single-site solution, a 3-section solution. There are multiple options that have been looked at, but I feel that Petterham site is the best and the easiest way of achieving this and to make our schools equitable. It does not create 2 unequally large schools, but easily handles a majority of the overcrowding issues. Yes, there will be redistricting, but that should be considered regardless of the decision for the benefit of our entire district. Finally, I would like to thank everyone who has participated in this process. It has been a rocky ride, but I feel that everyone's opinion has enhanced the discussion. I truly hope that when the decision gets made by you guys, that we can all get behind it and support it. Our kids and the future kids who attend our amazing school system depend on it. Thank you.
And who's this? Is this Mr. Who's this?
Good evening. My name is Sasan Zelkha, and I'm town meeting member in Precinct 14. I live by and Dean Road, the new renovated park. I would like to express my opposition to the 9th school at Baldwin, Putterham, and Pine Manor, and my support for Norberg plan. I'm a millennial parent, and whatever decision made today will impact my child's future. As a millennial parent, I care about the environment and clean air. I cannot fathom the idea of cutting 10+ acre of wooded area to build a school. I've heard the argument that we are going to swap land and create a big park, but that is not entirely true. Based on the latest article in Brookline Tab, we are looking to acquire monastery land, which is already an open green space accessible to visitors. Regardless of the ownership technicality in such a swap, we will have a net loss of 10+ acres of green land. Second, Baldwin, Pine Manor, and Putterham are located in an area where 80% or plus of students will have to drive to school, substantially increasing the carbon footprint of our town. These are bad choices for the environment. Obesity is the largest epidemic that's hitting our children. 27% of children in the US and 15% in Massachusetts are classified as obese. Making kids walk is an important habit that should be cultivated in them from an early age. How are we going to make walking a habit when children have to drive to school? Yes, some parents drive their kids to school even if they live 2 blocks away, but that is their choice. The school at Chestnut Hill would force parents to drive their kids to school every day. There is also an issue of equity. Ask yourself the following questions. How are we going to put a school at Chestnut Hill when we have 2 dilapidated schools in our system? 22 years ago, I lived on the board of Devotion as well as Jewish School. And Jewish School was in a dilapidated state back then, and 22 years later, the condition is same or even worse. Pierce is not handicap accessible. We can't have that in 2018. How are we going to answer those kids who have special needs? Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Vuig. Kathleen Vuig, 40 Cedar Road. Elizabeth Brewster, 73 Laurel Road. David Porowski, 73 Laurel Road. Gloria Brewster, 73 Laurel Road. Laura Baines Walsh. And then David Lescoyer. Is David still here? He left. After Ms. Baines Walsh, Kathy Murphy.
Good evening, and thank you so much for all the hard work you are putting into this project. My name is Laura Baines Walsh, and I am the mother of a kindergartner at Baker and another one who will be there in a few short years. But in addition to being a mom, I am also an 8th grade teacher. And the thing that concerns me the most about all of this conversation is about creating these mega schools. The idea of a school with 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 students in it, to me, is mind-blowing. People keep talking about community, but how do you have community with 1,500 students? How do you have a Halloween costume parade with 1,500 students? How do you have 1,500 students gather for an 8th grade musical, much less have their parents attend? How do you have a back-to-school night with 3,000 parents wandering the hallways? To me, the idea of a large school is the opposite of what I, as an educator, would want. My goal is to make sure that every child in that building is seen and known. And how in God's name can that happen with 1,200 kids running around? We need smaller schools. I'm in favor of building a 9th school, and I don't really care where it is. What I want to make sure is that the teachers in that building know my daughter's name. And I want to know that I know your child's name. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy, and after Ms. Murphy is Marie, it's hard to read the handwriting, Ballard, 48 Cedar Road. Lauren Bernard after that. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Murphy, and I live on Laurel Road. I'm in Precinct 15, and I have no children in the schools, and I'm coming very late to this conversation because the Putterham Woods site is basically at the end of my street. And I'm don't have really a strong view on whether one should do additions to current sites or have a 9th school, but I do have a strong view about Putterham Woods as a location. Precinct 15 and the corner of Precinct 16 that's in the southwest of Brookline have very few students in the schools. The population of school children is very low, and according to a report that was done for the school superintendent 2 years ago, our population of school-age children is actually declining. That means that whoever comes to the Putterham Woods School is probably going to either be driven or bused. And Hancock Village is, I think, about 1.5 miles away, and it is maybe the closest place that people would be coming from. People will be coming from North Brookline and from the far southeastern corner of Brookline, which are farther than 1.5 miles. If any of you have been to the Horace Mann Circle at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock on a weekday morning and tried to get through that traffic as it currently stands with no school at that corner, you would be very frustrated. There are days when I cannot turn out of my Laurel Road onto Hammond Street to go to work without waiting for a fairly long amount of time for cars to pass and for an opening to occur. I think the traffic issue, because of the fact that people would be coming from all over other parts of Brookline, has to be studied really carefully, or people in South Brookline are not going to be able to move and get to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Bernard, and is Deb Becker still here? Yeah, okay.
Good evening, Lauren Bernard, Devotion parent, director of, it's not Devotion anymore, Coolidge Corner School parent, I'm sorry. And I'm the director of one of the largest after-school program in the district. I'm also a town meeting member in Precinct 8. So tonight we're talking about making choices, difficult choices, choices that entail a great deal of work, a great deal of study, a great deal of effort on the part of you people. And one of the choices I had to make tonight was whether I spoke mainly to the people in front of me or the people in back of me. I'm choosing to address the people in front of me first because I think we need to talk about why we're here in the first place at this public hearing. We're here in the first place for this public hearing because at Fall Town Meeting last November, myself, together with Dan Saltzman and Mariah Nobrega of the infamous Nobrega, proposal, put forth a Special Town Meeting 1, Article 1, which asked to add to the choices for a 9th school alternative studies for schools that we already have, namely Pierce. So that's why we're here tonight. And that article won by a resounding vote of 208 town meeting members to 2. I don't know how many people here are aware of that, but that's a very resounding vote. And it wasn't a vote because we spoke well, and it wasn't a vote because we looked great. It was a vote because people in town meeting who represent people in Brookline did not like the choices before them. And those choices were for single-site 9th schools at either Pine Manor or Baldwin. So it's sort of a mystery to me why we're back here studying another ninth school that's facing almost all of the same challenges. We have an Article 97 land swap. We have significant siting challenges, traffic, etc. So our warrant article got a resounding vote because it was a good idea. And some of the illustrations you've seen up here show that it's a great idea. In terms of research, I'd like to go back to the teacher who spoke before about research in big schools and that children with special needs can't get a good education in a big school. Well, I am living proof that that's not true. And the Coolidge Corner School, formerly known as the Devotion School, was the biggest school in the district until we were divided in two, and we have the district-wide program for children with probably some of the most severe special needs, and it's a very successful program. Research shows that it's not the size of the school, but more the size of the classrooms. If we expand the schools we have that need renovation so desperately, we're going to get smaller classrooms, our kids are going to get a better education.
Please conclude.
Lastly, I would ask that you think long and hard what it means to build a ninth school where no children live, and that will cost the exponential cost of busing kids all over town for years and years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Becker, and then Jules Milner-Brage.
Hi, I'm Deb Becker, and I've got one child in Pierce in first grade and one who will be coming to Pierce in a couple of years, and strongly echo a lot of the comments today about the no breakup plan and or Pierce first. But one of the things that I wanted to stress as well was a lot of the discussion that we heard around the name change from Devo to the Coolidge Corner School, and what the discussion was around that, which was really around equity and really ensuring that we have schools that are designed to make our students and make our kids feel welcome. And that's what we're wanting for Pierce. The school, as has been echoed many times already, is in dire need of renovation. The teachers and the administrators do a phenomenal job, but why not give them the additional tools of a facility that actually supports learning instead of having to be traffic police as students are walking through classrooms or holding classes in closets. Give the teachers and the administrators the tools that they need to even better educate our students. So again, I strongly echo what Tommy Vitolo was talking about. He had great statistics that he was citing to really ensure that we've got equitable schools across all of Brookline. And again, also the gentleman who talked about the way the budget numbers have been represented. We're including budget numbers for land or commercial acquisition in North Brookline, but we've mysteriously not included anything about land swaps and things like that. So please be real in the numbers that you're putting out there. The other piece that I wanted to put forward is that if Pierce is not part of this initial plan of renovation and expansion, I don't think the town is going to have the appetite and the stomach to have yet another override to get Pierce the renovation that it needs. So please, do it smartly and do it right and do it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Isaac Silverberg. Sure. And then Isaac will be next. Mr. Milner-Brage.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of Rawson Road in Precinct 12, a parent of a Runkle School first grader, and a kindergartner in 2 years, and a town meeting member in Precinct 12. I'm very concerned with the quantity of spaces slated to be devoted to car parking in all of these projects. I view this car parking metric as a valuable lens for examining the fundamental soundness of the proposals that have been put forth. Sorry. I want to draw attention to the issue of something that's being glossed over in talk about walkability. It seems that when many people talk about walkability, they use this phrase. They're speaking primarily about the ability of students to get to school via a non-car mode. But what about the ability of school staff to get to school via mass transit, biking, or walking? What about the ability of parents to walk or bike with their kids to school and then continue to work themselves via biking, walking, or riding mass transit? We must include this holistic concept of human scaleness as a central goal Nothing less than the long-term sustainability of our community's urban fabric is at stake. Let's look at specific projects. An 80-car garage in addition to existing car parking at Baker, a 90-car lot at Putterham, a 90-car lot at Baldwin, a 65-car underground garage in addition to 25-car lot at Pine Manor. These sites' reported car parking requirements are somewhat understandable given their proposed location in mass transit poor, less human scale locations. But also the fundamental problems with setting major new school capacity for non-local students at these locations is demonstrated by the magnitude of these numbers. By locating non-local student school capacity at these sites, we'd be doubling down on the current less human scale land use and thus transportation infrastructure poor characteristics of these locations. It is premature. In my opinion, before we add any non-local student school capacity there, we should wait and see if we can succeed in encouraging development of improved biking and mass transit transportation infrastructure in these areas, which would only really be sensible and financially sustainable in coordination with development of more human-scale home and workspaces as a precursor for the appropriateness of developing major new non-local student capacity there. Now, this isn't an argument against supporting capacity for local students in these locations, and I hear a strong appetite for that in the Baker neighborhood. But I think we need to think long and hard before we add a substantial amount of non-local student capacity in these locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Silverberg, and after that is Rudula Donepudi. I didn't get that name right. But Mr. Silverberg is...
Thank you. My name is Isaac Silverberg. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 14, and I think I'm the most recent Brookline Public School student to be addressing the room this evening. I'd like to offer a couple of thoughts that I think aren't necessarily specific to one site or another site, but I hope that you take into consideration as you make this clearly difficult and complicated decision. The first thing is a piece about equity. There's been a lot of talk about equity, and some have suggested that equity looks like a neighborhood walkable school. I'd like to point out that for a lot of our students, that simply isn't a reality that's possible. Whether they're a Metco student that is coming on a bus regardless of where the school is located, or whether they're a student of a single working parent, like I was when I was a child. Sometimes those walkable schools, even if you live close by, isn't possible. You have to find another way to get there. I'd also like to say that it seems a little bit strange to me that some folks have suggested that traffic and busing are simultaneous giant problems. Last time I checked, if we had several hundred people that needed to be in the same place at the same time for half the days of the year, we'd encourage mass transportation. So it seems that busing is somewhat of a solution to some of our traffic woes wherever we are. And on traffic, many of our streets are filled to capacity. A lot of the drivers of that are technology and due to expansion that's happening outside of our borders that we simply can't control. Regardless of whether we put a school in South Brookline, Newton will continue to grow. And as traffic on Route 9 gets worse, people will continue to cut through South Brookline as long as Waze tells them to. So I would urge that, I'm not saying that traffic isn't important, but I'm saying that there are other factors in play other than what we do. And the final thing that I would like to put out, the second to last thing I would like to put out is that we have an opportunity to not just follow where projects are occurring in this town, many of which are driven by 40B, but we have the opportunity to really shape what we want some of our neighborhoods to look like. The neighborhood that I grew up in, at the end of Walnut Street, where it intersects with Dudley, didn't have a lot of children in public schools when my mom moved there. However, I've seen the fabric of that neighborhood change over time, which occurred after the new Lincoln was built, not very far away. The final thing that I'd like to say is that what I fear has been lost in some of this shuffle is that our schools on the inside are not the same that they were, even when I was a student not too long ago. Equity is not just about where a school is located. It's about the attention that students can receive on the inside. It's about extended day programs, having adequate space so that students can engage in a wide variety of activities. And it's about the space that they have outside of the school as well, and how whether there's space on a swing set or a playground to actually engage in play, and whether there's enough attention and space to go around at a given site. Thank you.
Thank you. Radula Danapudi, Ann Spencer, Bambi Good, Liz Cunningham, and right, and El Jad is next after Ms. Cunningham. Janice Khan will be after Ms. Cunningham.
Hi, my name is Lisa Cunningham, and I just wanted to address some things that were said in your presentation, Neil. You said that you were fully aware of some of the challenges of the Putterham Woods site, and that if you chose that site, you would be looking into all the issues. I'm an architect, and I'd like to say that's putting the cart before the horse. You should actually look into all the issues, and then you should pick a site. I looked carefully at the traffic study, as you guys know, and it's completely obsolete. It's based on an obsolete site plan, and it doesn't include any data of Route 9 to Hammond Street, where over 200 kids would be bused from. It also doesn't include any data on the planned improvements on bike lanes to Hammond Street and Hammond Street Parkway, and it doesn't address the fact that there's not enough parking for this school. And so the parking overflow, as somebody else already pointed out, is going to have to go on Laurel Road. Parking is a critical issue because this school is going to be made up of 93% commuters. So Laurel Road would essentially become the parking lot for this proposed school. You also mentioned that you hadn't spoken to the firefighters, but we did hear from the fire department about one issue tonight, and he spoke very strongly, but I think it's a little odd that you guys have proposed a site without talking to the firefighters about its suitability.
We have spoken to the fire chief.
Okay, well, that wasn't clear in any sense.
He was representing the union.
What's that?
He was here on behalf of the union.
I'm just saying that I didn't see any of that data in your reports. Maybe it was somewhere. I didn't see any of that data. So I think that a lot of us have spoken confidentially to people in the fire department, and off the cuff they say this is the craziest proposal they've ever heard of. I'd also like to know, with the planned traffic to add to the traffic study, if you could also consider the ability of the fire trucks. It's not just a fire training facility, it's actually a fire department which services the area. And I think that it's important that the fire trucks be able to get in and out of the station with the increased traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Khan, and after Ms. Khan is Benjamin Doty. Is Mr. Doty still here? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to have a public hearing. My name is Janice Kahn. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 15. I'm also a member of the advisory committee, and I am very supportive of my colleague Mariah Nobrega's analysis of how best to proceed. I think it's a smart approach, and I hope that you will take a good look at it. Others have described it. I am also against taking green space for building a school. But I'm here to talk about something that other people haven't really addressed, and that is the changing demographics in Brookline. When I first moved here over 40 years ago, I rented, and then when I wanted to start a family, I looked for a place to live, and the only affordable housing back then was where I ended up, actually very west along Route 9 and in South Brookline, which was the other place I looked. These were called starter homes. And it's no surprise to you now that these are no longer starter homes. In fact, it's very difficult for young families in this town to afford to buy a single-family home anymore, even in South Brookline or my neighborhood, my little piece of Chestnut Hill. And so what we're finding on my street now is that who's moving onto the street? Fewer young families, more empty nesters looking to downsize. So We are a town that's very unusual. We have no comparable community. More than 50% of the people, the residents in this town, rent. And almost all that rental housing is in North Brookline. So I would imagine that that's where young families are going to end up, is not in South Brookline, but in North Brookline. It's just an unfortunate factor of the unaffordability of Brookline. And I had a slide to show, but I wasn't able to put it up there. I will send it to you separately. But showing really that precincts 16, 15, and 14, South Brookline, Chestnut Hill, is almost all single-family homes with the exception of Hancock Village, and that is a big unknown. So my kids went to the Baker School. It was by then a 2 to 3 section school. And class sizes were 26 to 28 kids in a class. That was the normal, 3-section schools, large classrooms. We have a new normal now, which is larger schools and smaller classrooms. And that's just the new normal. So I just want to put that out there, that's what we are as a community are choosing now. And I want people to know that the 9th school solution in South Brookline is the plan is to build a 3-section school in South Brookline and then downsize Baker to 3 sections, giving South Brookline a total of 6 sections, which it still can't fill. It still does not have the capacity to fill 6 sections. So I really hope that you will look closely at where the need is greatest. Thank you.
Mr. Doty, and is Phyllis O'Leary still here? Gwen Taylor?
Benjamin Dowdy, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I think now the most recent graduate of Brookline Public Schools to speak. Quick question, very different from what's been before. Someone spoke eloquently, I think, earlier about the merits of Parsons Field, but I imagine that it's, because it's not under consideration, there must be a reason. Could I get a quick answer from someone here about why Parsons Field is no longer under consideration?
Mainly, one, it would be an eminent domain, and then using the costs of Cypress, 111 Cypress, it's a site that is 5 to 6 times bigger. Take 16 million times that number.
Okay, thank you.
Gwen Taylor and Joanne Sacalonzo.
Hey there.
Hang on. Sarah Story. Dan Deutsch. Mr. Wald. Okay. And Richard Dangle. Okay, you'll be after Ms. Taylor. Okay. Go
All
for it.
right. Really thinned out, huh? Thanks so much for taking public comments. I'll try and be quick because I'm starving and I really have to go to the bathroom. Pierce parent. I got one in kindergarten now, one who's on the way, and I just want to make this walkability thing kind of real. We bought on Greeno Street. We live right up the block for the walkability. We basically run to school every day because we're always incredibly late. But on the way home, which is way more civilized, we stop. We stop at businesses. We stop at Virginia's if my kids are particularly good because they get this weird grapefruit soda. And we stop for the fruit slices at the bakery. And they know the dogs. They know the crossing guards super well. The crossing guards literally know when they get their hair cut. And we see my kid's kindergarten teacher every single day. And I have also seen her at the bar after school, side note. And I just wanted to also just weigh against the idea that a quote-unquote mega school can't have community, because Pierce is huge, and we knew that when we bought. And my kindergartner feels a sense of community being in that historical building, which is a total crap hole, I admit. But he feels incredible sense of community in that school. And also, we have one really unreliable, lousy Subaru, and we would have to buy another car if it wasn't walkable, and we rent our parking space to our neighbors because we don't need 2 cars, so they have somewhere to park their huge new Range Rover. And I just want to make the point about this cascade of impacts that happen when you don't have walkability that I'm not sure is being taken into account with stuff like the local businesses and my poor neighbor's parking situation. So that's all I had. I'm going to head out to the bathroom, but thanks so much.
Thank you.
And,
Mr. Nangle, and after Mr. Nangle is Elisa Ridwejo. Okay.
Hey, don't head to the bathroom yet. I'm just getting going. Richard Nangle, town meeting member, precinct 15. I want to say something good about Article 97. In 1972, the people of Massachusetts enacted Article 97 by a margin of 82 to 18%. The law was designed to make conversion of protected land difficult, in effect, preventing the destruction of public open space. In order to facilitate the destruction of public open space, and in order to build a school, we have seen an attempted land grab that has taken us through nonprofits, institutions of higher learning, and religious organizations. In search of a land swap, we have traveled a low road. Then we have the petition to build at Putterham Woods. Now, we've all heard of a push-pull. For Putterham Woods, we had a push petition that envisions a beautiful park that does not exist, says a school at Putterham Woods somehow enables a quick resolution at Pierce and Driscoll, and which omits all mention of the Fire Department Training Center, which any person concerned with health and overall well-being would see as an obvious deal breaker for the site. There is no such thing as safe smoke. That's why firefighters will wear breathing apparatus while training. If you talk to any firefighter in this town, like the one who spoke tonight, they will tell you that this proposal to expose kids and school staff to the training facility is irresponsible. The woods provide a needed buffer for the neighborhood. That's why the training facility was put there. A school is the absolute last thing that should be next door. The recent listening sessions held at schools all over town are evidence that the people in this community are ready to unite around sound and positive renovation and expansion projects. The 9th school sites, by contrast, are divisive and have no clear path to completion. They waste our time and drain our public coffers. Putterham Woods was chosen as a site with no public notification. Even this past weekend, as I canvassed the neighborhood, I met people who knew nothing about it. That is not how we have traditionally done things in Brookline. It's not even close. Of all the options that remain, Putterham Woods has the most legal hurdles to overcome, and that's thanks to Article 97 and all to the good. Let's unite the community by saying, Pierce, yes.
Ms., you'll have to help me with your last name. And the last person signed up is Julie Green, and then I'll take anybody who wishes to speak after that.
Hi, I'm Elisa Ridrejo, Precinct 14, Runkle parent, Brookline resident for almost 15 years, and feel lucky to have found a place in Brookline after an exhaustive search with my architect husband, looking many, many towns, and we feel so lucky that we actually made it into the town, and that was in terms of buying, and that was 7 years ago. It is tough to be here, but everyone who is in town, I would say, and people moving into town now, pick their locations very carefully, where they want to buy their house and the neighborhood, and we feel really lucky that we are in the Runkle neighborhood. The school was renovated, of course, before we had a kindergartner there. So we used to drive our son to Pine Manor. He used to be at the nursery school there, which is the best kept preschool secret in town. I have to say, it's a fabulous school, and one of the things we loved about it was a beautiful campus, and we did a driving commute. But once our son made it to kindergarten this year, I have to say, hands down, we love being in a walkable neighborhood. And I can't say enough about all the comments I've heard, and the previous woman who, I just totally relate to her running down the street. So much better to run down the street or scooter or bike than have to get in a car and drive, even though Pine Manor really was only 1.2 miles from our house, or 2 miles, still enough that we'd have to get in the car. And so that was the reason we moved to Brookline. And I would say a lot of people at Runkle and everywhere else probably feel loyalty to their neighborhood for that very reason. They picked their houses and where they chose to buy carefully. So having said that, one of the things that really resonates with me are, I see these numbers about 27 classrooms, 640 seats. And I'd really like to know who those 640 seats are. Where are those kids going to be coming from? Is that 640 families, or maybe 400 or 500 if you've got multiple kids in the schools? I just don't know where they're coming from. I think a lot of people here are really in support of a ninth school, but are all those people in support of the ninth school willing to raise their hand and say, I am going to move to that district. I am willing to take my kid out of the school that we are zoned for currently to be redistricted elsewhere. And I would say that I would be really disappointed if, being 0.2 miles from Runkle right now, we would be redistricted elsewhere. And I think other people would feel the same way. So I wonder if there's been any surveys done. You know, you could almost do something with SurveyMonkey to every parent in current schools, existing schools, to find out how many of you would actually opt in to move to a ninth school. If you were redistricted, wherever you are, Brookline-wide, if you were redistricted, would you be happy about that choice? Or would you rather stay in the zone and the neighborhood that you chose to be in? And I think that the numbers might be surprising. I don't know, maybe you would easily get 640 families willing to relocate, or would those people be forcibly moved out of their neighborhood and be forced to drive, whether they have to drive? And it sounds like there are obviously people who will drive anyway, but you know, I think there are enough people that would probably find the ninth school solution, wherever it is, to be dissatisfactory. So thank you. Just another plug for walkability.
Thank you. Ms. Green, and then come on up. Just tell us your name.
I was L-Jad, but I was skipped.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was skipped. I wish to make it clear that we welcome children from other communities to our schools. However, given that it is claimed that we do not have an adequate amount of seats for the students in our schools, that there are not enough classrooms to account for present and future student enrollment, that there is a desire to keep student numbers low in the classrooms, and given that we are in a multi-year disagreement as to where the ninth school is to be located, that our foremost responsibility and obligation is to the students of Brookline and the families who live here, whose taxes or neighbors' taxes pay for the schools and pay for the operation and functioning of these schools, that Brookline taxpayers have for years spent a great deal of money on committees, research, consultants, and architects for a decision on a suitable ninth school location, that where a school is most likely needed, the Cottage Farm area, has been completely abandoned, that the Stop and Shop, aka Village location, was an insult to the many elderly, carless, handicapped families and other people who shop there, that taking land from the Pine Manor College location does not take into account the many minority and not wealthy students who attend the college. It is a lack of consideration toward the taxpayers of Brookline, especially single, elderly, and those on fixed incomes, to bear the burden of years of money spent on the aforementioned. In addition, expanding existing schools, that is Devotion and Pierce and the other ones that were mentioned, that crowds the already dense areas of North Brookline, compounds the existing backed up and jammed high traffic areas, creates overly large school complexes, loses the intimacy and safety of smaller neighborhood schools, seems to support phasing out the current formerly sufficiently budgeted and funded programs that bring approximately 500 students, a number that equals a whole school in itself, from out of the area to the Brookline schools. There is no need for wasting more taxpayer money, time, and effort to find a space/location for a ninth school. We do not need a ninth school. No more NIMBY, YIMBY, wasting taxpayer dollars, voting on, passing, and having multiple tax overrides. Problem solved. And I agree with Nancy Daly that we could probably use the old Lincoln School. That's the end.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, so I think we've gone through all the folks who wish to speak. We have a lot to think about, and we're going to start thinking and deliberating. Well, we'll be thinking right after this meeting, but we'll start deliberating next Wednesday. So, thank you very much.